Section 4 of 11 Stories by Henry Hasse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Cinda J.M. The Star of Satan, Part 2. Garth shook his head and pointed across the chasm. 50 yards away, the opposite precipice, a bit higher, was limed raggedly against the stars. Our best bet is to get over there unobserved. It may not be easy dealing with him. Procol patted his own ray pistol at his side. No, Garth cautioned. We don't want to use those, and I don't think we'll have to. Slowly, circuitously, and with much effort, they gained the opposite rim. It took them nearly 10 minutes, but the negotiation was masterful and noiseless. Finally, from behind a protecting rock formation, they peered again into the depths, their eyes becoming slowly accustomed to that darker darkness. Then Garth silently pointed. "What is it?" Procol whispered. "I don't see a thing." "Keep looking a little to the right." Then Procol saw it, the missing lifeboat, lying quite still there below, like a tiny silver bug with its nose smashed, and that disseminated whatever slight doubt they might have had. "What now?" Procol whispered. "We've got to go down," Garth said hoarsely. "Nothing else. This side doesn't seem so steep. If we get to a point where we can see him, we'll talk to him." "Can't do that unless he's got a phone, too." "We'll see about that when we have to. Keep looking down there a while. Let your eyes get used to it." Presently, Garth first, they began the descent. It was slow and ticklish work, but now they could dimly see their way enough to proceed in safety. Garth followed a little gully, which at times was only an arm's width. For perhaps 200 feet they descended. Then Garth stopped so suddenly that Procol bumped into him and nearly lost balance. "What is it?" Procol forged carefully forward. Garth merely pointed. They had come nearer to the bottom than they had supposed. They now stood upon a narrow ledge scarcely 40 feet above the sharp little valley, and below the edge of their protecting ledge they saw a light. That was not surprising. It was half expected. But the light wasn't a signal flare. It was a crude, open bonfire. "Well, Hype, you were right about that too," Procol murmured. "That means there's air of some kind down here." Hype nodded and pointed to another ledge perhaps 20 feet below them, and to the right. Carefully they negotiated to it. Again they peered below. Then for the first time they saw the man, but only a silhouette. Really a smallish figure, but looming up large beside the flickering fire. He stood quite still, one hand at his hip, grasping a ray pistol, peering up at the opposite precipice edge, the edge where he had fired at Procol. Very still he stood, and very still the two men above him watched. Then the figure turned, still very cautious, toward the fire. He bent and threw several handsful of something on the blaze. It immediately leapt high, illuming the rocky terrain for 100 feet around. The two men crouched back, but the light did not quite touch the ledge where they stood. His hand still by his hip, the tiny figure turned in a complete circle and surveyed the line of cliffs above him. Then, still peering around, he huddled miserably by the fire, seeking warmth. But that brief glimpse was enough. Both men had recognized the grotesque figure below, and it was Procol who pronounced the name first in a hoarse whisper. "Chiswell. J.P. Chiswell, president of EMV Lines. Of all men to survive in this hellish place, it had to be him." "Why not?" Garth snapped venomously. His lips were tight and his face was pale beneath his helmet. He was remembering again, with all the old bitterness, the exceedingly unethical ruse by which he'd been captured in the spaceways many years ago. The ruse engineered by Chiswell himself. "Why shouldn't it be him?" he went on. "The survival of the fittest, remember? Look at that ray gun." For a moment Procol was uncomprehending. Then he said in a rush of fierce words, "Hype, I'll bet you're right. Of course you're right. The survival of the fittest. And with that gun, old Chiswell was the fittest. I'll bet you he murdered the others and kept all the provisions of that lifeboat for himself. There's no other way he could have subsisted here so long." Garth nodded grimly. "Maybe. Some of 'em may have been lost in space somewhere, though. We've no proof of murder yet, but I know he's capable of it if it means his own hide." "Sure, I know that too. Look at the 2 pot shots he took at me. We've got a maniac on our hands, Hype. What'll we do now?" "For one thing, he hasn't a helmet. I'm going to get out of this damned uncomfortable headgear." Cautiously, Garth unscrewed the helmet at his neck, lifted it slightly and sniffed the air. Then he threw it back where it dangled from his shoulders. "Don't breathe too deeply," he warned Procol, who followed his example. Garth reached into a rocky cleft nearby and brought out a handful of greenish lichen-like growth. "See there? That's the stuff I told you sometimes grows on these big rocks. Maybe it's what he's burning down there. He could dry it out if the sun hits down this far. All right, I'm going to call to him now, so watch out for that ray gun." With that, Garth peered down and loudly called, "Chiswell! J.P. Chiswell!" Through that thin air, his voice rang clear as a bell of doom, echoed eerily between rocky walls, and went shivering away into the black distance. The man below at the fire was on his feet and facing them with a fierce snarl. His hand darted up, and a ray flashed toward the voice to splutter harmlessly on the rock some distance from where the men stood in the darkness. That act alone proved to them he was mad. From where they stood, they could have rayed him with ease. But they didn't need that mad act as proof of the man's madness. For in the full glare of the fire, his face was a fierce caricature. Even from their distance, they could see the wild gleam of his eyes as he leaned tautly forward, trying to pierce the dark. Could see the gaunt face, beak-like nose, shaggy brows, and tangled growth of beard. They could see the flick of his tongue over lips drawn tight, and could hear the animal snarl that rumbled warningly out of that throat. There, in the red glare of firelight, he was a demon out of hell. For only a moment he stood there tautly facing them, fiercely peering. Then, with an agile bound, he leapt away from the fire and scuttled like a huge beetle toward the opposite cliff. They could only see him dimly now, but they saw him turn in a posture of defiance, arms spread out as though protecting the cliff behind him. "Phew!" Procol breathed. "That goes double for me," said Garth. "Come on." He leapt the remaining distance to the base of their cliff, and Procol alighted easily beside him. They peered across at Chiswell. "There's a sort of cave over there," Procol exclaimed, "and he's standing in front of it. Say he's gone mad, all right, but there's something else behind his madness." Garth nodded. He grasped his partner's arm and moved forward slowly, saying, "Careful now. We'll try to reason with him." They'd almost reached the fire when they saw Chiswell's hand come up again with unexpected swiftness. They fell flat upon the rock, and just in time, as the ray flashed close above them. Garth realized they must have been easily visible in the fire glow, and could have kicked himself for a fool. But now Procol was chuckling. "Didn't you notice?" he whispered. "That last ray was dim. It didn't much more than reach us. His charge must be getting low. Couple more like that, and it'll be finished." A few minutes they lay there, watching as Chiswell made no further move. They could see the cave plainer now, a cave as high as Chiswell's head, but narrow, extending darkly back into the towering rock. Without warning, Procol leapt up, ran a few feet forward, and flopped down again, just as Chiswell's ray stabbed over him. "Procol, you damn fool!" Garth crept forward beside him. "It's all right. I doubt if he has another full charge in that gun now." "Chiswell," Garth called, but softly. "We're your friends. Don't you understand that? Put down the gun. We've come to take you away from here." For the first time then they heard the madman's voice. It was just as soft as Garth's had been, but cunning. The voice spoke 5 words. "I know what you want." "We want to get you off that rock. That's what we want." Then Garth added, "The Martian princess, don't you remember? The space wreck? All the others were saved. Don't you want to be saved?" You sound like some street corner missionary, Procol said, chuckling. And again, the madman's words came cunning, but with a certain cool menace. I know what you want. See? Procol said, you can't reason with him. Hell, I wonder what does he think we want? Procol leapt up, stood exposed in the dying firelight. Again the ray spurted. Gravity was light, and before Procol could fall away from it, the ray caught him in the chest. Procol fell, and Garth cursed. It's all right, Procol assured him quickly. Just scorched my suit a little. Well, that finishes his ray. You're still a fool, Garth snapped. Now, from where Chiswell crouched, they heard an animal scream of rage as he realized how he'd been tricked. Damn you! And they heard the clatter of the gun as he flung it toward them, and their blood ran cold as Chiswell burst forth in a profane and garbled rush of mad words. The speech was so inarticulate that it wasn't until he was nearly out of breath that they began to gather the purport. Damn tricky, are you? But I know you. I know why you're here, too. Want to get me away, do you? But you won't. It's all mine. Do you hear? All mine. Mine! You'll never get it. I was here first. Keep away from me. Keep away. You just try it. Ha ha. All mine. The rush of words ended in a high-pitched scream. They couldn't see him clearly now at all, but they could imagine froth on his lips. They heard his gurgling breath for a moment, then it died away, and he was abruptly, cunningly silent. Procol grabbed his partner's arm so tightly it hurt. His whispered voice was hoarse with emotion. Hype? Did you hear? Did you? It must mean. Tell me I'm right, Hype. Tell me. Garth jerked his arm away. He frowned, but there was a light in his eyes nearly as bright as Procol's. Sure, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. I guess maybe I'm thinking the same thing you are. Gold! It's happened, Hype. It happened at last. And Chiswell found it for us. No wonder he's protecting that entrance over there. It's a vein. Procol laughed almost shrilly. I never thought we'd make a strike, Hype. Never really. This means back to Earth. Back to Chicago. We can buy off the rest of our time. There are ways if you work it right. But Hype Garth, long ago pirate of the spaceways, was looking at his partner silently and calmly. Procol saw that look and stopped suddenly abashed. He remembered. Oh, Damn, Hype, that's right. I didn't think. Sure, Procol. I'm serving 40 years on the station. Might as well be life, for it was Chiswell and his crowd who put me there, and were tickled to get me there. Sure, you can buy your time through the obvious channels, but not me. For me, there's only one slight chance. A chance in a million. You know what that is? Garth laughed softly. One chance in a million, and it's here in my lap. If I could get Chiswell away from here and back to the station, his sanity might return. I think it would. This sort of madness is only temporary, and then he might be very appreciative. You of all persons ought to know better than that, Hype. But Garth went on musingly. Yes, he might be appreciative to the extent of fixing pardons for both of us. And if he isn't, why, then I'd just have to persuade him, wouldn't I? And I know some very good methods. His eyes glittered. Damn it, Hype, listen. You know what had happened then as well as I do. Suppose he did fix the pardons, even willingly. Do you think we'd ever get out here to this gold again? Never. We could never beat out the Chiswell interests. Garth, smiling thinly, looked straight at Procol. Sure, I realize that perfectly. You want the gold, sure. But to get it and get away with it, you're going to have to dispose of Chiswell over there. And if you do that, there goes my one chance of a pardon. Nice little stalemate, huh? And Garth, as he watched his partner's indecision, was suddenly enjoying the grim stalemate. But Procol wasn't. He stared sullenly at Garth for a moment, rubbed his chin, grumbled baffledly into his throat. Garth grinned back at him. Suddenly across to them came Chiswell's jumbled words again, this time tinged with fear. "Whispering, are you? I hear you over there plotting. You just try it. Rob me? No. Ha ha ha. 2 of them. 2. No, you can't. It isn't fair. I'm all alone." This time his voice ended in a little sob of terror, perhaps because he realized for the first time the odds against him, perhaps because he remembered that he'd thrown his gun away. Garth, from where he lay, reached out and threw a handful of dry, matted lichen upon the fire. For only a few seconds it blazed up, to reveal Chiswell crouched before his cave, a wild sight, trembling and waiting. And it revealed something else. "Look!" Again Procol grabbed Garth's arm in his excitement, but Garth had seen it too. Within the cave behind Criswell, along the sides, only dimly discernible in outline, were masses of something that was not rock, seemingly sacks of something. That was enough for Procol. And Garth, too, was sure his own eyes were blazing as he tried not to let Procol's fanaticism get him. "Can you beat that for luck?" Procol was whispering. "He started getting the gold out already. Or it's platinum, maybe. Anyway, it's going to save us a lot of time and work. Lord knows how he ever expected to get it away from here, but, well, I guess I'd have started mining too if I was in his shoes. Come on, Hype, let's get over there." Procol had quite lost sight of the issue. Garth kept his own voice calm as he said, "Not yet. It'll wait." "Well, which is it going to be?" Procol was still staring over at the cave. Now he looked back at Garth. What did you say?" "I said, what happened to our little stalemate? You know, the one we were at a moment ago?" The light in Procol's eyes died. But Hype, you can't be serious. To pass up this?" "I've got to pass it up, pal. You know that all the wealth on this rock couldn't buy my freedom. There's my passport to freedom, crouching over there in front of that cave, and he's got to stay alive." Procol was becoming angry. You're just exaggerating." Garth merely shook his head, smiling wryly. "All right, Hype, I've got an idea. We'll finish off Chiswell. We've got to do that. Then we'll mine the gold. We'll get every ounce that's here, and that ought to be plenty. Then I could get back to Earth myself, and with all that wealth, I could help you. I'd make the proper contacts, bribe the right people. You know how it's done. And I'd really try, Hype, and you know you can trust me." "Yes, I know I can. And I know you'd try, Procol. But you simply haven't any idea what you'd be up against. Trying to buy a pardon for me? Any other man? Yes. But you see, Procol, the Earth corporations would never let it go through. They know I'd soon be back pirating the space lanes again, and I would, too. I hear that pirating has been pretty tame since I've been away, if you know what I mean." Garth smiled reminiscently. Across to them came Chiswell's whimpering, his half-sobs of fright as he heard them whispering. He was like a trapped wild animal, not quite daring to flee for fear they would pounce upon him. Procol's sullenness was slowly mounting to anger again. There was sweat upon his brow, his face twisted with indecision. Neither man had moved from where they lay, prone beside the dying fire. Garth looked at his partner and said, "I'm going to leave it squarely to you, Procol. The decision's all yours." "Damn you, Hype!" Hype simply watched. He wasn't smiling anymore, for he already knew what the decision would be. He saw the fanatic light return to his partner's eyes. He saw his jaw set determinedly. Procol wiped the sweat from his brow, and his body tensed, the lure of the gold. Procol twisted around to face Garth squarely then, but he couldn't look at him squarely as he said in a voice that was hardly audible, I can't give it up, Hype. It's too much to ask." And with a sudden little push, he was on his feet and bounding low across the space toward the cave and Chiswell. The action was too sudden for Garth to do anything. He couldn't even get to his feet, much less intervene. He saw 2 leaps carry Procol halfway across the space. He heard a frightened little cry from Chiswell, and suddenly he felt very sorry for him. The The last 20 feet, Procol literally soared, almost horizontally. He leapt too wide, but he managed to reach out and grasp the startled Chiswell by the throat. They fell lazily to the ground in a tangled heap, Chiswell bleeding in thin terror like a lamb with a wolf at his throat. Trapped animals can be very dangerous in their terror. Procol's hold loosened and he rolled over lightly. From his distance, Garth saw Chiswell's hand come up. He glimpsed something massive in it. He cried out a warning, and Procol twisted around, but not in time. Garth saw the mass of rock descend, and he heard an awful crunching sound as it smashed Procol's skull. Chiswell bleated no longer. The bleat was a snarl as he leapt astride Procol, and without waiting to see if he were dead, gripped his neck with unbelievable strength. Garth heard the vertebrae snap sickeningly, and still the madman clung. He clung until he was quite sure Procol wasn't going to move any more, and then his hand slowly loosened. He leapt aside, and with the mien of a sculptor surveying his masterpiece, he gazed on the thing at his feet. Then, uttering horrible little throat noises, he grasped Procol's hands and dragged him to the cave and into the darkness beyond. Garth staggered blindly to his feet and stood there swaying. Procol was dead, but there was something else. A semblance of thought and reason was trying to flow back to his brain, but it came too slowly. Garth moved toward the cave just as Chiswell emerged. If there had been any doubt before that the man was mad, there could not be now. As Garth approached him, he stood there half erect, gibbering, ghastly in the pale ghost light of the sun that was just beginning to reach down into the chasm. Garth stood before the disgusting thing that was no longer a man. His fist moved only a foot and caught the thing in the throat. On Chiswell's face, as he sailed backward, there was a look of mild surprise, as if he could not quite understand how it happened or why. But when he hit the rocky wall, he crumpled and lay still. Garth looked at his fist wonderingly. He passed a hand across his brow. That's what he had needed. Clear, concise thought was coming back. He entered the cave and stood a full minute there in the darkness before he remembered the torch at his side. He lifted it and was about to flood the cave with light. Then that familiar premonitory awareness was with him again. Abruptly, startlingly, vividly, it came, engulfing him. It told him not to click on the light. Garth stood stock still for a moment, hand half lifted, indecision creeping on him. Procol's body was in there, he knew that. But, yes, that's what had brought the numb fear a minute ago. That's why this was different. Why had that madman dragged Procol in here? For the first time in his life, Garth disregarded his warning premonition. He clicked on the torch. Out on the station, in the long, dreary days to come, Garth was to remember that scene. His torch remained on for only about 10 seconds, but in those seconds he remembered telling Procol, some of the party may have been lost in space somewhere, but now he knew none of them had been. He recalled telling about the lichen and the moss here, which desperate men might conceivably use as food, but now he knew Chiswell had not. His ears rang again with the madman's words, all mine, and now he knew their horrible purport. He remembered when the fire had flared up and they had glimpsed dim masses of something along the sides of the cave, something that was not rock, something that was seemingly sacks of gold. But now he knew those dim shapes were not sacks of gold. It was not gold Chiswell guarded so viciously, for there was no gold here. In those few seconds before he clicked off the torch, Garth felt his mind slowly slipping away into a chaos of vertiginous horror, but he caught it on the brink. He retained enough of sanity to realize why he must not leave his dead friend here. He emerged with the body of Procol into the palely creeping sunlight. He saw the thing that was Chiswell stir and breathe and try to sit up. Garth reached for his ray pistol, aimed it, and tried to press the button. Then he let his hand drop. That was strange. He had thought he felt sorry for the thing there before him, but now he didn't feel sorry. He simply didn't feel anything. but he had Procol. With a body lightly across his shoulders, Garth began the ascent of the cliff to where the cruiser waited. He did not once look back. An idiotic desire to laugh seized him, but he did not laugh. He knew that if once he laughed, it would be wildly, and he could never stop, and he'd become as mad as the thing down there. End of section 4.